Like the previous episodes that focused on Will, Angela, Looking Glass, episode 8 of Watchmen, A God Walks Into Abar, took us on a tour of the life of Dr. Manhattan, and you definitely don't need us to tell you that it was a doozy.
But before we get into it, keep it here with GameSpot for more stuff about the stuff you love. Our episode starts with a flashback to Saigon in 2009. It is 10 years before our series starts. We get a shot of Dr. Manhattan picking up a little Dr. Manhattan mask, putting it on, and then literally walking into a bar.
Yeah, and in case you missed the pun, the title.
Yeah, he like walks through the gap that would have been.
The title sequence, Abar.
Yeah, so, and it's Mr.
It makes it very clear. We all should have known that this is what was going to happen. The theorists had it.
God, people figured this out so quickly, which I'm kind of proud of, honestly. But the bar is Mr. Eddie's bar, which is something that Watchmen comics fan will recognize as the bar that Eddie, the comedian, shot his pregnant girlfriend in.
Yeah,
so that's a little bit of a downer.
That fun event that we all love. But yeah, the director confirmed with Polygon that it is the same bar.
Yep, so
interesting.
John literally walks into the bar, finds Angela, who is now working as a cop. She made good on her promise, that creepy promise she made to the executing officer back when she was a kid. She's a cop now. She's drinking alone. It is the anniversary of VVN Day, which is why there's just Dr. Manhattan paraphernalia kind of strewn all over.
And it's also the anniversary of her parents' death, which happened on VVN Day 20 years earlier?
Yeah,
89?
I think
87?
it was around there. So John walks up to Angela and then has maybe the most awkward pickup conversation ever.
If I can guess why you're here drinking all alone, will you let me join you?
Sure. Why am I drinking all alone?
You're commemorating the anniversary of your parents' death.
As a pickup artist, John kind of sucks.
He's terrible.
I mean, it works ultimately.
He's very sweet. We'll preface it with that. Like, he's obviously not malicious, but it's really awkward.
She's definitely not interested for much of this conversation.
And for a great deal of it, she doesn't believe, justifiably, she does not believe that it is the real Dr. Manhattan who is sitting down and talking to her.
Right, it's interesting. He's like, I mean, he's a famous person, right? And it's this little conceit that he has where he wants her to say yes to having dinner with him. Without knowing that, because he could prove it at any moment. He could make his skin glow, he could create a sand castle, or all the stuff all his favorite activities he could do at any time.
The two things that Dr. Manhattan loves to do: glow and make sand castles.
But we do right away in this conversation, we start to get some answers. So he says this about his time on Mars.
That's not me on Mars.
Oh?
It's a recording of me carrying out a series of predetermined patterns, like a computer program.
This moment answered a ton of questions that we had about kind of John's whole timeline in the story, namely how he could be on Mars, building his sandcastles with the spy satellites, kind of monitoring him, versus, like if he could also be on Europa.
If he's responsible for that whole situation.
Right.
And how can he be on Earth at the same time?
Yeah. And so it turns out that he just wasn't. He left a little decoy up there and just kind of let it do its thing and wanted to distract people, which, I mean, I guess makes a lot of sense if you know that you have basically the world's eyes on you and you kind of want to get him off.
We knew previously from the comics and everything that he can split himself off into multiple copies. I don't know that it had ever been explored that he can like set one up as a little automaton.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's ever happened.
But it's clockwork, right? It fits with his whole thing of being a watchmaker, and just, winding it up.
And just letting it go.
Exactly. There's so much interesting stuff in this conversation, and it kind of serves as like Laurie's joke did in episode 3.
Yes.
It's like the framing device that they keep going back to. But what I want to talk about specifically right now is the way that Dr. Manhattan experiences time.
Yes.
Because this kind of creates a lot of problems in this story.
Yeah, and it's not a new thing. Like, we're not actually learning this so much about John because we knew it from the comics, that he experiences his entire timeline simultaneously.
It's consistent with the way that Alan Moore wrote the character originally.
Correct.
I would say some of the confusion comes from the way that the show treats Dr. Manhattan versus how the comics did. Because in the comics, Alan Moore wrote Dr. Manhattan as a deconstruction of Superman.
Yes.
And that's not what the show is doing.
No.
The show is treating Dr. Manhattan as a paradox machine, essentially. Like, Damon Lindelof loves time travel. Damon Lindelof is responsible for Lost.
Right.
And that's the aspect of Dr. Manhattan that he wants to explore.
Right, and it makes concrete a bunch of the sort of vagaries that happened in the Watchmen comic, where, I mean, Dr. Manhattan is a central character of the Watchmen comics, but he's arguably not the main character. Like, he's not the consistent focus, but he's the main character of this episode. So we're allowed to kind of have more concentrated focus and more like nailed down aspects of his powers, which is what this conversation does. It sets up kind of the rules and the parameters of exactly how Dr. Manhattan works in this story.
The way I experience time is unique, and for you, particularly infuriating.
Right, which is he's not time traveling.
No.
He never time travels. He experiences everything that he's ever experienced all at once. So he's not seeing the future.
Right, no.
He is remembering the future.
It's a deterministic point of view. And so for John, all time is deterministic depending on what happened to him as a child. That set into motion the things that are happening to him now, and he has no control over anything. It is cause and effect until the end of his life.
When he's telling Angela about something that happened in the future, he's not predicting it or seeing it in a crystal ball.
He's experienced it.
He's remembering it. Yeah, he's remembering it, and he's experiencing it in that moment as he's experiencing the current conversation and everything else that has ever happened to him. And thus, he can't change the future.
Right, he can't do anything.
Influence anybody else to change the future. If he's telling you something happened, it's already happened, and nothing he tells you, no action you take, no action he takes, even though it seems by the end of the episode like, dude, you could have just moved 6 inches to the right. For some reason, it doesn't work, and we could argue about it all day whether it makes sense.
Right.
But that is the narrative conceit within which the episode is operating.
Correct.
There's that famous line from the comics about how we're all puppets, even he's a puppet, he can just see the strings.
Yes.
So he has no agency, and that's always been what the character is about.
This scene also segues into our answers about Europa. Finally, we get definite answers about what is going on with Veidt and all of his weird clones. John, at the end of the comic, said that he was going to go off and create life. He did. He went to Europa and literally made the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, he is Mr. Phillips and Crookshanks are Adam and Eve, and he is God. It's the most predictable version of it, kind of. The whole conceit is like, it had to have been him, right?
Of
but
course.
Throughout the series, because he was not a focus of the show, I feel like we were trying to come up with a lot of other explanations about what might be going on.
We wanted to give True so much more power than she actually has, I think. But it turns out, I mean, it really was just, he literally did exactly what he said he was going to do in the issue 12 of Watchmen. He went off and made life. And we get, in the next scene, we get a little bit more about where that life came from and why it looks the way it does.
So we get a glimpse into John's childhood. And again, this is not retconning anything about Dr. Manhattan, but it is peeling back way more layers than the comics did. And because a lot of John's story was vague in the comics, it leaves room for expansion like this. So John grew up in Germany partially, and then they kind of fled to England when his mother left his Jewish father.
For an SS officer, ugh.
There's a lot going on there.
Sure is.
But more importantly, they wound up at this manor house, which winds up being the exact he doesn't make a copy of it on Europa. He literally teleports it there, which we had questions like, is there just a crater there where it used to be? Nobody noticed this. We thought maybe he like bought the land, I guess,
like
before he did that.
in World of Warcraft. Just vacuumed up an entire castle. That's fine.
So he witnesses Phillips and Crookshanks making love with each other.
As a child, this is where he gets his birds and the bees talk, is because he gets caught
from these two awkward strangers.
Yep, and but this moment, as uncomfortable as it is to watch, ends up being John's entire character boiled down into one little interaction.
Make it your purpose to create something beautiful.
Crookshanks and Phillips just give him this talk, and I mean, we're left to assume that he never gets it from anyone else, and so this is the foundation of his character, that he was put on Earth to make something beautiful, and now he has the powers of a god, so he can very literally do that.
Do you think we needed to get this like explicit, extremely direct explanation of his motivations?
I don't know. I think in a way, I kind of do. Like, as deliberate and as like on the nose as this moment was, I think it really did a lot to kind of literalize the kind of vagaries, again, which is what that conversation in the bar did with his powers. This kind of literalized the vagaries of his motivation, because for a long time, you have the whole clockwork framework in the comics, but that's kind of the extent of it, and the rest of it, you're just kind of left to think that, like, oh, he just likes...
He has a god complex
right.
because he has the powers of a god.
Exactly.
I don't know, because it made sense in the books at the end when he left. I think I'll try creating life. It seemed like a logical... I don't know that I needed more explanation for it than it was just the next step. Like, it was just what he decided he felt like doing in that moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the act of creating life was fine, but I think the fact that it is human life still, and the fact that it mirrors... Like,
and some bisons.
Yeah, and some random animals. I guess he really wanted tomato
growing
trees.
On a tree.
Yeah. But like that's that, if I were John and I were really coming that far untethered from humanity, and if I were that sick of humanity, the first question in my head would be like, okay, why would you just recreate humanity? Like, why would you just remodel something exactly as a human?
I guess. And so so what this explanation does is explain exactly that.
Right.
Who he's modeling these people after.
Exactly.
And it turns out to be a pivotal childhood memory.
Yeah.
Okay. We go back to the bar where they're still having this conversation. And the one thing that I really want to talk about here is we learn, Dr. Manhattan's motivation, or the way that he, in retrospect, thinks about his time during the Vietnam War, which was, that's him 30 feet tall, zapping villagers with lightning bolts from his hands. And it's not great. Especially at the vantage point that we have in 2019.
Right.
But his explanation is that he was just trying to be what he thought people wanted him to be.
It's a really interesting conversation because, as we just discussed, he would have known exactly what the perception of those years would have been in 2019 while he was doing it.
Yeah, while he was doing it, he was already experiencing this conversation.
And so that's kind of Angela's confusion, is like, well, why did you do it? If you knew already that you were going to regret it, that you were going to look like it was going to make this horrible, like it was going to orphan all these children, it was going to do all of these terrible things, why do it?
And his explanation is extremely cute. Like it's a it's like a writer's line, which is,
haven't you ever done anything you knew you were going to regret?
It's kind of romantic.
Yeah.
It doesn't really answer the question.
No.
Because there is no answer to the question. Like,
no, because as far as John is concerned, again, he did it because he had to do it, because he had always done it, because he was never not going to do it.
In the comics, when he goes on the talk show where the reporters blindside him with the questions about giving people cancer, why would he do that? Why would he go on the show if he knew that was going to happen? Why does he act surprised? Because in that moment, he is surprised. Even if he previously remembered the future, he's still like it.
It's a lot. It's a whole lot. But again, it's John sees himself as having absolutely no free will. Yeah. So he does these things that he has to do, and that's how it works.
Even if he's going to regret them.
Yep.
At this point, we're kind of getting different glimpses into various points in Angela and John's relationship, including the first date to the morgue.
That classic first date trope. So we learn, obviously Angela has some very, very strong feelings about Dr. Manhattan, to the point that she literally does not want to be seen with him. Like, she may be attracted to this guy and is like kind of being won over by this conversation that she's had, but her like stopping point is like, nope, you're Dr. Manhattan. I don't want to be seen with you. And so John's like, I don't have to look like this. And that's where we get this Cal's human body kind of coming in, and they go to the morgue and they find a person, Cal Giuliani, I think is his name. Calvin Giuliani, and they pull him out of his little morgue tray and they say, he dropped dead, no real cause, just like June.
I want to know if Dr. Manhattan killed him.
It's loosely implied.
Did you think about that?
Yeah, it kind of feels like, it kind of also feels like John killed June. Really, like in that moment, like with the graffiti mural like looming over her.
Oh my God.
I know.
I hope that's not what happened.
So I'm just like,
this is literally the first time I have heard this, and
I'm just saying, it feels like kind of like there's a big thing that says murderer over her body.
Oh my God, you're so right. Oh
yeah.
Because he could make himself look like anyone and it wouldn't matter, but he knows that he needs like a social security number, like he needs an identity, right? So
right.
Oh
yeah, so
boy.
He could have killed the real Cal, possibly, and then Angela pulls him out and he's like, this one seems like a good one. And so that's where Cal's human form comes, and he just takes that identity, and now he has a birth certificate.
So that's like 2 weeks after their initial meeting.
Yes.
And then we jump to 6 months later. They are making love.
We are not gonna fight.
She can tell that he's not present, and he says, well, we're about to get in a fight.
Yep.
Which obviously becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
And this is when we get some more answers, because John teleports away when she tells him to leave, and he winds up
in Karnak, the Adrian Veidt stronghold.
It's extremely fun to see.
It's like the post-apocalyptic, like he's like not been keeping it up, so it's like all like overgrown and there's snow inside.
Yeah.
It just looks like there's a horrible like war-torn bunker that he's just been hanging out in for 20 some odd years.
I was excited because I immediately recognized it from the comics. I was like, oh, he's at
Veidt's
stronghold thing.
Yeah.
Where Veidt has just been chilling for 25 years, like watching all his TVs, pulling strings, sending the squid rain around the world.
We get the answer of where, how those squid rains are happening.
Which again is the most obvious explanation.
Yep, he's just sitting there basically like pulling a crank, dropping them into a portal.
We had all these conspiracy theories, like maybe the government's doing it, like blah, 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 blah. No, it's just
Veidt pushing a button.
Still Ozymandias. This conversation between Veidt and John, I think, is one of the coolest scenes that we've gotten in the entire show, because what it really is a follow-up for these two characters on one of the final scenes of the comics, and one of the most important scenes of the comics between two of the most important characters. And it's kind of them, almost reminiscing on old times 24, 25 years later, talking about their motivations, what they were thinking.
You've just attempted to destroy me. I'm telling you that I'm disappointed in you.
Right. Sorry about that.
Veidt saying that he was gambling on John having morals, which is interesting, because we've had this discussion about like, why would John return to Earth? It's like he wasn't completely checked out from humanity. It goes back to why he killed Rorschach rather than let Rorschach expose Veidt. It's because he does care a little bit, and that's what Veidt was hoping for.
Right. He's still fundamentally at heart, he's still just a guy. Like, he's still a human with all these superpowers. We also get a really interesting kind of dig from Veidt at John's new form.
It's not the 80s anymore, John. This kind of appropriation is considered quite problematic now. It's 2009.
Which is very interesting in the context of the show, because we simultaneously get John's backstory, which is explicitly establishing him as a white German kid.
Yep.
And then also we have Joe Keane on the other side of that, who is erasing Dr. Manhattan's race, saying that he's a white man, now he wants to become a blue one.
Right, by contrasting a white man with a blue man, Keane in this previous episode is saying Dr. Manhattan does not have a race.
Right,
but Dr. Manhattan was a white person, is now a black person, because at the end of the episode, when he becomes himself again, he keeps Cal's form. So in a way, we're erasing a white character and replacing him with a black character, which is the opposite of appropriation.
Right.
But at the same time, we had a black character already, and now we're erasing him and replacing him with somebody who used to be white.
Exactly.
It's very complicated.
There's so much happening here, and it's very interesting the way that it's kind of not letting it ever be easy. And I think that's fascinating. But the fact that Veidt has the presence of mind to be like, and also is just not afraid of John at all.
It's a little bit of a meta line.
Yeah.
I saw somebody on Reddit complaining that in 2009, people were not talking about appropriation in the same way that they were in 2019, which I don't think is true.
No,
I'm pretty sure we knew in 2009 that appropriating other cultures was bad. Maybe you didn't know about it. But anyway, a good response that I saw to that is that Robert Redford had been president for 20 years already in 2009.
Right.
So even from an alternate history standpoint, the world in Watchmen 10 years ago is way more liberal and progressive than the real world was in 2009.
Yes.
So no matter how you slice it, it works.
It definitely does, and it's very, very interesting.
Veidt also reveals in this conversation that he knows where John has been.
How do you know I was on Europa?
A little elephant told me.
And now, in this moment, it could be Beyond, it could be Lady True, but we don't This episode does not give us the answer of what their connection is, how they know each other, how Beyond or True knows John is on Europa.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
Satellites, I don't know. That's finale stuff.
Yes.
I have full faith that we will get to that.
Right. So, but I mean, Veidt is really holding his title as the smartest man in the world because he just knows.
Yeah, he has all the info, which is why John has come to him with this problem. He wants to forget who he is because time after time, the reality of who Dr. Manhattan is has ruined the things that John wants, which is a normal human relationship with a woman.
Right.
And
He wants to not have, his experience of time is destroying his ability to relate to other people.
And he sees it happening with Angela, and he makes the choice to ask Veidt for help. And he knows exactly what will happen, obviously, which is that Veidt has created this thing, but it's the one thing that John can't see because he bombarded. It's like the tachyon particle thing from the comics.
Yeah, if you remember back from the comics, Veidt's like conspiracy to like make John believe that he was giving people cancer was all related back to tachyons, which are like the one subatomic particle that John has no awareness of.
And tachyon particles are like if you Google it and look up the science of it, they're like a hypothetical particle, and thus, sci-fi writers tend to use them as a plot device to kind of do whatever they need them to do in the story.
Yep.
So
he made this the ring that we saw Angela pull out of Cal's forehead, and he's like, "Oh, when'd you make this?" And Veidt does the,
Oh, my dear sweet John. I made it 30 years ago.
Yeah, in the comics, it's he does his evil villain monologue, and they say, "Well, we're gonna stop you." Well, I already did it. And it's a little callback to that line.
Yeah, and it's like, I made it 30 years ago. Like, of course you did, Veidt.
The final little bit between Veidt and John, I don't even know what to call him anymore.
Cal John.
We get the answer that we've been waiting for since the first time this weird old man played by Jeremy Irons popped up eating a birthday cake in the first episode, which is, what is he doing here? And he wasn't imprisoned.
Nope.
It's not a punishment.
Nope.
I didn't see this coming, and I don't think anyone predicted this.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. He literally asked John to take him to his utopia.
Yeah.
It was Veidt thinking that his work here on Earth was done and that he wanted somewhere better.
I mean, speaking of God complexes, like
Adrian
wants to be needed. He needs to be the savior. He wants to be worshipped. And so when he hears about this Garden of Eden full of sycophants, he said, "Oh, that sounds like paradise."
Yeah. Oh, that's his utopia. That's his life's work realized. Like, he's frustrated now because he's sitting in Karnak being like, "Oh, I mean, I'm doing everything I can. I'm hitting my button. I'm keeping people kind of in line, but like, they're still trying to kill each other."
And
like,
nobody knows about it. Nobody knows what I've done.
Yeah, like
no one
nobody's
knows the
celebrating
truth.
me. No one's doing anything. No one's really like, my plan is working, but it's not working well enough.
It's kind of the dumbest thing Adrian Veidt has ever done.
It really is.
He's definitely has, he's the smartest man alive or whatever, but like,
his own ego is constantly kneecapping
it's his weakness.
him.
It's his weakness. Yeah, definitely, because he so quickly accepts a one-way ticket 300 million miles away to a place where, like, give me like an interstellar walkie-talkie or something, just so I can call you in case I change my mind. Like, has no second thoughts or reservations, doesn't hesitate.
Nope.
And,
Yep,
that's that.
And that's how he ended up on Europa, and that's why he was making his weird little Dr. Manhattan play, and then that segued into him being like, "This is boring, I don't like this."
Yeah, we saw the whole progression already in the previous episode, so we know how that winds up, except the very end. I can't wait. In the previous episode, Angela, as she was waking him up, she said,
"Time to come out of the tunnel."
We didn't know what that meant, but we learned this episode that
it's very sweet.
Your favorite song's about to come on.
Yeah, and so
that's not my favorite song. Well, it is now. Ha.
Yeah, so John, we're back at the bar and they're having this conversation, and he's letting her know that, like, that we're going to be in love for so long, but then there's a period of time that he can't see, and that he knows that it ends in a tragedy.
Yeah.
Which is, we know now is about the total amnesia and the thing in his forehead and whatnot that he can't see. But the song is The Tunnel of Love.
And she says it sounds like a tunnel. So we're going to enter the tunnel together, and we're going to come out the other end together, and then there's going to be a tragedy.
Yeah, something bad will happen, and neither of them really knows what or how, and John can't see past it, which is really daunting when you're a person who can see everything.
Yeah, kind of exciting too, probably. The scene where she put it in his forehead, I thought was really beautiful.
For a completely non-linear story about a guy who already knows everything that's happening and none of this is a risk for him, it's a sweet romantic story. Like the romance between John and Angela feels very real and very natural.
In that moment, I think, because before then it feels
right. Yeah, like it's
like something that he's manufacturing as he
exactly.
goes.
Yeah. So like there are these intersections in their like story that were where the lines cross perfectly. It works super well,
Yeah.
and then otherwise they're kind of waving around each other.
This moment though makes their relationship different from his past relationships, and it stops being deterministic. Like.
Yes.
For the first time, I felt like there's hope for John to, for John as a person, not as Dr. Manhattan.
Exactly.
To have like a happy story. Mm-hmm. Even though we know it's going to end in tragedy.
We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's 2019. I had to wake you up because you're in danger.
Back in the present day, John is here. And he seems confused.
Justifiably a little thrown off.
He still looks like Cal at this point, which is strange.
Yeah, like why? Like he glows blue and then immediately goes back to being Cal, I guess?
I've seen some comments, and I know some people here thought that his makeup during these scenes is not great.
Yeah, it's a little awkward.
The eyeshadow under his eyes doesn't necessarily look...
Yeah, like... Yeah.
I thought this episode was awesome overall. Maybe this is a nitpick, but it's something.
It's a little, the aesthetics are a little awkward.
Yeah. So Cal, is he Cal now or is he John?
I would call him John now that he's awake.
Call him Jal. So Jal goes out to the pool and he stands on it, and this is important for some reason. He says,
You need to see me on the pool.
Why?
It's important.
Maybe finale stuff.
Or he just knows that this is where the conversation is going to happen.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so, but also we get this moment where the kids look out and they're like,
There's a blue man on our swimming pool.
Of course, he zaps them away, and the immediate, it was like, what happened to the kids? And
Angela's reactions during this whole scene are so funny. Get the up off the pool and talk. Like, come on. So this conversation, though, is like the crux of the entire... This is what sets the events of the whole show in motion, and it is a classic. From Lindelof's perspective, it is a time travel paradox, even though it's not really time travel.
It's not time travel, but it kind of is.
It is a chicken and the egg question, as John is talking simultaneously to Angela and to her grandfather Will in New York 10 years earlier.
Right.
And the answer is... the chicken and the egg popped into existence simultaneously.
Right. So the burning question of how did Will know any of this was happening? How did Will know how to kill Judd?
How did Will know he had a granddaughter?
Right. How did any of this happen? Angela told him.
Right.
It literally came directly from her, and she realizes that the second she says it to John, and he's like, oh.
He says he didn't know.
Yep. And Angela immediately is like,
No shit. Did I start all this?
Credit again to Regina King's acting, because the complexity of the different emotions that she goes through in that moment as she realizes that she is the one who put the idea of Judd being a member of Cyclops into Will's head somehow is so good.
So good.
Let's talk also about this theory that John gave Will his powers.
Yes.
Because there's obviously been a lot of imagery involving eggs
Yeah,
throughout the show. There's, in the first episode, she's cracking eggs into a bowl, makes a smiley face.
Right.
The second episode, Will is casually eating hard-boiled eggs and just disgustingly chucking the shells.
And then in this episode, John does a little parlor trick for Angela at the bar to prove that he's Dr. Manhattan, and he produces an egg and drops, and she cracks it into a beer.
And he reveals also that he believes, this is new information, John believes that he could theoretically put some of his DNA or something into organic matter, have somebody eat it, and they would gain his powers.
Right, they would gain something.
We don't know exactly what the 7th Cavalry's whole plan is, besides turning Keen into Dr. Manhattan somehow. It may rest on this, it may not.
Right.
But the theory is that given all the egg imagery
Mm-hmm.
and given the fact that Will is like 105 years old in 2019.
And still perfectly healthy.
My feet are just fine.
The wheelchair is fake, he
Mm-hmm.
can walk, and is being entrusted with watching the kids.
Mm-hmm.
When John teleports them to the theater,
Right.
is that John somehow has transferred his powers to
Right, yeah,
Will,
does-
and that's going to be revealed next
Does
episode.
Will have some of the powers that also kind of, there's, if you remember back in episode 2, there was that moment with Topher building the castle that John is building. Like, how would he know that?
Yeah.
And how would he know to build that? So it kind of begs the question, did Cal, like, unknowingly do that to his kids as he was cooking for them?
Yeah, he makes them waffles all the time, and
All the
he brings it
time.
up in this episode.
Yeah.
Too, he goes into the kitchen to make waffles, and she grabs the eggs
Yeah.
and smashes them.
So-
Which, again, I think it's one of those things that once we see the finale, we'll rewatch the whole series, and all of
Like,
this will have
oh.
10 new layers of meaning.
Yes.
The shootout is awesome.
It's amazing. And there's
The
this,
score is so good.
It's so beautiful and, like, gut-wrenching.
Yeah. Right before when he says, this is the moment that we've been waiting for since the beginning of the episode, when, you know, she asks him, there wasn't a moment.
Yeah.
This is the moment when he tells her, she knows he is right and knows everything. So the moment when he tells her,
I just told you that you can't save me. And you're gonna try to anyway.
that's the moment. It's
Yeah.
honestly gorgeous.
It's beautiful. So we have Angela, like, doing another one of her back in episode 1, when she pulls her, like, secret weapons out and is gonna go fight.
Yeah.
She does the same thing. She, you know, gets her gear out and is gonna go take on the 7th Cavalry by herself.
There's so many of them.
There's so many.
Because
and
they roll
she-
up, as she comes out, like more trucks roll up, and
Yeah.
I went, uh-oh.
Yeah, so, I mean, to her credit, she mows down a whole bunch of them all by herself.
She's good, yeah. Her plan with the truck to get in there and drive toward them while shooting.
Yeah, ugh.
Pretty reckless.
Yeah, reckless, but, like, she's got it.
Unlike before, like we learned in this episode that John is Cal/John is the reason that Angela survived the White Knight.
Right.
Because he has this, it's
He
a little bit,
kinda
it's
can
a Deus
Hulk
Ex,
out,
it's kind of
yeah.
a Deus Ex Machina. Yeah, we discussed in the last episode. Can he Hulk out if he needs to?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, he
Yeah.
can. He will reflexively use his powers in a life or death situation.
Right.
Which is, I liked your theory of the 7th K came in on the White Knight, shot Cal in the head,
Right.
which, you know,
Damaged the little thingy.
right, and then he popped out and then they put it back in or whatever.
Right.
I think that would have been even cooler. Whatever.
Yeah.
So he's loose, you know,
Right.
the beast is out and he saves her.
It looks like they've got her, again, dead to rights. It's the White Knight all over again.
Yeah.
He comes in and saves her, and it feels almost like he's... Obviously, this isn't it, because this isn't how Dr. Manhattan works, but it feels like John is being very spontaneous in this moment. Like, it feels like he's doing something that is his choice, rather
Right.
than something that was determined.
But it's not.
It's not. They have a tachyon cannon. They neutralize him immediately.
The discussion I've seen around this scene is really why did he didn't have to go and stand in that exact point. He
Right.
didn't have to leave one guy alive.
Right.
If he hadn't been standing there, Angela would have seen around him that there was a guy and just shot him.
Yeah. But that's
and-
not how deterministic worldviews work. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how determinism works.
I
so-
think maybe the way that it was shot and directed
Mm-hmm.
kind of is not doing the episode any favors.
Yeah, it does. It begs questions that shouldn't have to be asked.
It could have been done in a different way that didn't make it
Seemed like he could have just been like, whoop.
Yeah, that didn't make it seem so much like he was, because the whole thing is he can't choose.
Right.
And the way that this whole scene was choreographed and executed makes it seem like he was deliberately choosing.
Like he was making some choices.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
he's not supposed to. So I understand the complaints with
Yeah,
this.
there's
I
some
thought
confusion that it could have been avoided.
he's not dead though.
No.
So he's been captured. That was
Right.
the whole plan for the 7th K that was laid out previously, is they're going to capture him,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to become him, and then they're going to destroy him.
Yes.
I think in that order.
Yeah.
So
We have to assume
John is
that
captured.
he's now in the same place with Lori. If Lori is still in the JCPenney with the cage,
yeah,
we have to assume that he is being put in that cage.
that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Oh boy, I
That's
can't
gonna be,
wait for
That's
that
going to be
one.
an Adrian Veidt, John Osterman level,
Yes.
follow up from the
yeah,
comics.
and
of-
I'm going to
of
be clutching my hair the whole time,
Yeah.
like, oh my god.
seeing another conversation between Dr. Manhattan and Lori when they're in this situation.
Yep.
cannot wait. I also have no idea what's going to happen.
No.
There's so many loose ends that the show needs to wrap up. Remember Lube Guy?
Who can forget Lube Man? Who was he?
He's never come up. He's popped up that one time, never come up again.
He's with the Ninja Turtles in the sewers now. Like, that's the big reveal, like the post-credits.
I do think the Slippery Surfer, as we have dubbed him, is going to return next episode, but there's so many other things. Like,
if he doesn't, why?
And we
why?
really never got more of Red Scare, Pirate Jenny, Panda.
Your favorite character, Panda. Yeah, no, Panda's got to come back.
There's so much world building that seemingly hasn't gone anywhere. I really, really hope the finale sticks the landing.
Yep.
That's the end of the episode, but also isn't the end of the episode because for the first time in the series, we
get a post-credits.
An after-credits scene. So if you missed this, hit pause right here. Go back to the episode and just let the credits roll because it starts as an audio thing. There's some audio that comes in over the credits, and then it transitions into a scene. So go watch that now. Okay.
Will you stay, Master? What?
So we first get Veidt. We have to assume that this is his punishment. Like, this is
taking place after the trial.
Right, and so
the year-long trial.
Yeah. His year-long trial has found him guilty, and this is his punishment. And he's just tied up and prone, and they're smashing tree tomatoes. Every one of the clones comes up to
Master,
him.
will you stay?
Yeah, Master, will you stay? And he says no. And then he smashes. They smash his tomato in his face, and that's it.
I find myself still wondering whether this is part of his plan.
Exactly.
Or if I'm leaning more toward getting his message up to the satellite or whatever was the plan.
And then everything after that is just kind of...
Everything after that is just biding his time.
Right.
He doesn't care what happens to him. I mean, he could lie and say, yes, I will stay, and then they would stop smashing tomatoes on his face, presumably.
Right.
He just is out of to give, it seems like.
It seems like, and it also seems like he's doing the same thing he did with John, where he's gambling that these people that John made in his own image will have morality.
Not in his own image.
Or not in his own image, but...
in the image of these people that he idolized.
Right, but...
Because that's a difference between John and God.
Yeah. John, as God, created them in the image of his own memories.
Yeah. He created them in the image of something, which I think is an important distinction. Like, in the conversation of, is John a God, is John a man? I think that's an important distinction.
Absolutely. But regardless, Veidt is taking a gamble here the same way that he took a gamble on John having morals. He's gambling that the people that John created are not going to, like, execute him. They're not going to, like, do anything serious to him. So, I mean, maybe that's what he's just kind of hoping. Like, that was his gambit. Like,
so he gets tomatoes smashed in his face during the day.
And he's like, whatever, it's fine.
And then at night, he lives in this jail cell in this tower, and the game warden comes and delivers.
Gives him another birthday cake.
Delivers him cakes. There's 7 candles. So
yes,
he's been here 7 years. So this is 2016. And this is as far as we have caught up to the present in Adrian's storyline. I want to talk about the book that he's reading.
Yes, it is Fog Dancing. It's a fictional book that exists in universe by the guy who wrote and illustrated the Tales of the Black Freighter, which is
Max Shea.
Yes.
Yeah, so Max Shea in the fiction of the comics had disagreements with the artist and with the publisher on the Tales of the Black Freighter, his seminal pirate comic book series, and transitioned to being a novelist.
Yes.
Fog Dancing was very successful.
Right.
It spawned some adaptations.
Yes, it has shown up in the series just kind of in little castaway ways.
One of the adaptations was in the Vietnam video store that Angela was in.
Yeah, and like the Clarks is the family, she was reading it on the stoop.
So we learned in the Peteypedia this week, and you can explain this, some of the actual story of Fog Dancing, which I think we hadn't gotten before.
No, we had never known what Fog Dancing was actually about. So Petey, it turns out, had written basically like a book report. Like there's like a Fog Dancing fanzine called Nothing Ever Ends that exists in the universe, and Petey wrote a synopsis of the story. It's very, very interesting. Go read it. But
Petey's such a dork.
He is such a nerd.
I relate to him so much.
I do too. The kind of long and the short of the story of Fog Dancing is that fog dancers are like black ops, like the blackest of black ops soldiers doing the dirtiest deeds to get, peace in our time or what have you. And so there was a character.
Sounds a lot like Adrian Veidt.
Yep. It's a character who is trying to leave his past of fog dancing behind, and to do so he experiments with it like a drug trial that is supposed to be like an anesthesia for surgeries. And he does it, and he gets the most restful sleep of his life and becomes kind of addicted to it and falls in love with a girl who's also addicted to it. And it spirals into, it seems like a Slaughterhouse-5 kind of situation where it's like a war story, but it's also a surreal kind of psychological story. it ends with him realizing that the love story and the conspiracy and everything that he has uncovered in his life was a product of the drug trial, and that the entire time he's been asleep and wakes up and the person he thought he was in love with is his doctor. And it's wild.
Also, to me, basically confirms that PD is Lube Guy. The imagery that he describes from the Fog Dancing book is of these characters wearing gas masks, but also wearing skin-tight silver suits.
Slicked up.
Slicked up in super high SPF sunscreen.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid a little bit. Like
it's very strange, but I think we're going to see that in the next episode. I also want to talk about the Game Warden, because we learn more about the Game Warden in this after credits scene. We learn that he was the original Mr. Phillips that we saw earlier in this episode, right as Dr. Manhattan was creating this place. He and the original Mr. Phillips and the original Crookshanks, who are Adam and Eve, walk up out of this, I forget what he called it.
A liquid creation engine.
Yeah, and we learn that this Mr. Phillips became the Game Warden. Do you think Dr. Manhattan told his creations to keep Adrian Veidt there? Or do you think Adrian Veidt showed up, became their new god, but also that the Game Warden, having gone through some trauma because he wears the mask, and we learn that people who wear masks do so because they experience trauma, whether the trauma was John leaving or something that happened to Crookshanks, because we don't know where his original Crookshanks was. Whether this is something that the Game Warden decided on these rules on his own.
My immediate thought is that the Game Warden decided it on his own, because I think it might have been born of Veidt's arrival, in that the Game Warden is kind of now mirroring Veidt's outlook on things rather than John's outlook on things, and that's the aspect of control. Like, if everything aside, Adrian Veidt loves to be in control of things, and I think that is really, you have the very first one who would have kind of mirrored John's apathy, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, John's sort of like hands off.
But he didn't make them in his image, so I don't know about that.
I don't think you made him in his image. I think that when you have something that is impressionable, like a new life, basically, like the parents of that life are going to influence the thing, right?
Yeah, but he also made them to be like pure or whatever, however he put it. He made them to not have the foibles that humanity and by extension he has.
Sure, but they're also impressionable, I would assume, maybe. I mean, we don't really know enough about them to know whether or not they can experience that sort of like impression of like and mirroring and whatnot.
And they may have gotten dumber over time.
Sure, yeah.
Or that maybe when he's pulling them out of the lake and throwing them back, he may be looking for
the ones that are like that
are going to do what he says.
There's a lot going on in this conversation, and we don't know whether or not if we can't even tell if this Game Warden is working in concert with Veidt or if he's working actively against him, because there's a horseshoe in the cake.
He didn't make that cake. The Game Warden didn't. He says Mr. Phillips insisted, right?
Right.
So we got to talk about the horseshoe.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end here. But the one other thing I wanted to point out about the Game Warden is that, and we learned this in the trial, is that there is one commandment here. It is,
"Thou shalt not leave."
John created them to be different from humanity. So if they get one commandment, maybe they stick to it. And they stick to it so hard that when Veidt shows up, they apply that commandment to him and force him to stick to it as well. That's my theory.
I like that. I mean, I think that makes more sense than them being corrupted by Veidt. But I do I'm also just married to the idea that Veidt just screws everything up everywhere he goes. So, I mean, we'll see, hopefully.
So the horseshoe. The horseshoe, the Mr. Phillips and Crookshanks or whatever baked this. This is the horseshoe from the first episode. They gave him the birthday cake with the one candle on it.
Yep, and a horseshoe instead of a knife.
And he says, "Not yet."
Yeah, which is wild. How does this work? So
how did he know?
He has a horseshoe in his cake, and Veidt is so excited about it, and we don't know why. He starts...
He's cackling.
Digging, and I don't know if he's just gonna Shawshank his way out of the castle or what. Like, we can't tell, but there's a horseshoe and it matters.
I truly have no idea what's going on. And it's so weird that they put this after the credits where people might miss it too.
Yep.
Like, is it not important? We're going to be back here in 1 week talking about Watchmen episode 9, the series finale, but I want to point out in the promo they called it the season finale, so maybe HBO knows something about whether there's going to be more Watchmen that they haven't revealed yet. I hope so. In any case, we're going to break down episode 9, see how they fly next week. Until then, stay tuned to GameSpot, hit us up on Twitter. As always, she's Rusty Polished, I'm Rogue Cheddar, and thank you for watching.